Hey folks, this is Picohan on the North American server, and this is Mehbote review number 3, the Mighty Hood. The Hood is a Tier 7 premium British battleship that has been in the game for quite a while now, and like the Myogi and the Monarch, she is largely considered pretty mediocre. With 8.0, she is actually getting some presumed buffs, but these, along with CV rework in general, should not fundamentally alter the way the ship is supposed to be played. So as before, we'll look at some numbers, and then we will look at some gameplay. So I'm not going to go over all the numbers, just the ones that I think are relevant. Here's the Hood compared to some of the Tech Tree Tier 7 battleships. The main thing to note, she has 8 15-inch guns in twin turrets, 2 in the front and 2 in the back. I would point out that she has very fast turret traverse. This is comparable to the 3 turret Gneisenau and much faster than the other 3. That being said, her alpha damage and DPM on HE and AP are pretty pathetic, and she doesn't really get the super high fire chance of the Tech Tree British either. For the most part, and I think this is what a lot of people don't like about the Hood, especially against battleships, you aren't really looking for big alpha strikes. You're just trying to get more consistent damage over time. There's a little bit more nuance here, though, that those numbers don't show, and some of these numbers you can't see in-game. Like the rest of the British battleships, or most of them at least, the Hood has a short fuse time compared to the Colorado and the Nagato, and this gives her the poorest penetration between these 3 ships, but in theory this also means you're less likely to overpen thinly armed targets like cruisers. This is supposed to be a trade-off, making her better at shooting some parts of ships or some types of ships, and maybe this was more helpful when you still got BBAP on destroyers. Most people, I think, they really don't like this, but I think it's fine. I would also caution here that not just for the Hood, but for a lot of things, the numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story. Just looking at the dispersion and sigma values between these 3, the Nagato theoretically has the best dispersion, but I think most people would consider the Colorado to have the most accurate guns. Looking back at the broader comparison, secondaries are really not worth mentioning. They're all kind of crappy at Tier 7. The Gneisenau's are maybe serviceable, but I don't think any of the others are. With AA again, the Gneisenau is the real AA powerhouse with 136 DPS at 5.2 kilometers. King George and Colorado are okay, but the King George, of course, gets her AA knocked out really easily. Nagato is pretty crappy, and the Hood is pretty crappy. The Hood does have a gimmick, which I will cover in a bit, and it may really not be that relevant, given that CV rework is coming up. Maneuverability is another of what I would consider a strong point of the Hood. She ties the Gneisenau for being the fastest Tier 7 battleship, and she is one of the fastest battleships in the game. I think only the Iowa can make 33. Her turning circle is the largest, but her rudder shift is the fastest. And despite what these say, I would say the Hood and the Gneisenau are among the best handling battleships in the game. And at least for me, that's part of what I really like about the ship. For concealment, the Hood is mediocre. It's only the KGV, which is actually pretty good. Air detection, the Hood is actually the worst because it's so big. Today, that's really not that relevant, but with CV rework coming up, who knows how that will change. So, back in game here, we can look at the armor viewer. I think a lot of people consider the Hood to be not that well armored, but I personally think it's pretty good. She does have very large sections of 25mm plating in the bow and the stern, but that's pretty standard for Tier 7 battleships. The mid-deck, though, is 51, and she does have these medium thickness bits of armor going along the entire side. So as long as you can get both AP and HE spam to hit these areas at an angle, she tanks pretty well. Compare this to something like the Duke of York, where even though the main belt is thicker, she's covered in 25mm plating, which makes her very susceptible to normal AP pens and HE spam. The Hood also has pretty good armor around the turrets. I don't find that she loses them very often, and especially not compared to like the Duke of York again. Also, just like the tech tree British battleships, the Hood has a basically fully underwater citadel that's pretty hard to hit, if not impossible. So basically, this medium thickness armor combined with her speed, her maneuverability, and fairly good shooting angles means that the Hood is a very good kiting battleship, and she's very survivable if you can take advantage of these features, even though her actual damage output is not that impressive. Now, let's take a look at the modules and stuff. The Hood's got Damacon, Repair Party, and oh look, Defensive Fire. This is basically the Hood's consumable gimmick, and for the most part, it's only good for panicking planes, since your AA is not particularly impressive. She does have these short-range quote-unquote rockets, which get buffed a ton when you use defensive fire, but they're so easily taken out that it's practically useless. The upcoming CV rework will also end AA mechanics as we know it, so we'll see what becomes of Hood's signature gimmick. Looking at the upgrades, steering gears mod I think is the best, since you should keep moving and you don't need to accelerate. Damacon is also very good if you think the stock rudder shift speed is fine. Aiming systems is probably the best thing in slot 2, especially since the Hood's stock accuracy is not amazing. You definitely don't want to use this one, and I think you definitely don't want to use either of those two as well. Damacon System Mod 1, this is pretty standard, and in the first slot, most people use this. I like this since I'm not running det flags on the hood, but to each their own. Finally, looking at captain skills, I do have the 19-point Jack Dunkirk from my Monarch, so this is the same build as that. In theory, if you have a dedicated captain, you might be able to optimize a bit differently for the hood. Like, she might not need expert marksman, and you could take the points off preventive maintenance and expert marksman and put it into basics or something. But for the most part, if you have party target, AR, superintendent, concealment, fire prevention, you're pretty much good. You can use more or less a standard battleship build. The last thing to look at here is the flag setup. For battleships, you really want the fire flag and the healing flag, and everything after that is kind of optional. Like, speed would be good on the hood, maybe ramming, maybe AA. Secondary is probably useless. Consumables, if you have that defensive fire, maybe you can get it off faster, but again, it's not that useful of a DFAA. And the rest of your points you can put into econ. Don't forget, she is a premium ship. She does have some premium perma-camos, so you're already getting a economic boost just from running the ship itself. And on that note, I think it's time to look at some gameplay.
So this first game is top tier, and the general gist of the hood is the same as, say, Congo. What you want to do is you want to push the things that you can kill and kite the things that you can't. What I typically like to do is push not towards center, but maybe the center of a flank, and turn around and kite once it feels dangerous. And typically you can get pretty good broadside snipes on things that are moving toward the flank. You saw that easy one shell citadel on that Kirov. When to turn around is really something you get from experience, but it's a mix of looking at, say, your priority target, what you can see on the minimap, and where your position is. Here, the priority target ticks up to 3, and I start making the turnout, but as it ticks down to 2, I actually cut back in, and it drops even more. I slowed down here because I thought this Atlanta was going to do something stupid, and Atlantas are kind of like DDs. You really want to try to get rid of them early because they're really annoying to deal with. Unfortunately, I think I led a little bit too short, and I didn't get that much damage on him. But he's charging into the B cap and going to get deleted. Now I'm going to speed up and actually make the turn for 2 reasons. Not that many people are shooting at me. You can see that priority target is only at 1, but if I keep going forward, I start being able to be in a crossfire between the ships on the 10 line. Furthermore, this is the latest probably that I can turn and turn behind the small island to my left, and I think turning in front of that island is dangerous. This is basically a safe play. In the meantime, the Furutaka is reversing, and we only need shells from the back turret to take him out. People say the hood is inaccurate, but I don't really find it that bad. Earlier, I had said that I like to turn and kite the flank, but in this situation, there's basically no reason to do that. We already have the sea cap, and it looks like all the enemy ships on this side are falling back. So I'm actually going to turn around entirely and flex toward the B cap and try to support that instead. This next bit I've sped up because there's a lot of driving. What's happened is that I've pulled up to the B cap and we've taken the cap, but we're also down 2 ships. At the same time, there are 2 low health cruisers over on the 10 line that I would really like to take care of before having to deal with the main force coming from A. And this is a little bit sloppy, having to go from C to B and then B back to the 10 line, but it's kind of an example of something that really only the hood can do because it's so fast, and it definitely makes the final fight easier because this is a close game, as you will see. Okay, so this is the final fight, and picking a fight is not just about picking which ship to shoot at, but also how you want to engage them. Here, there's 3 battleships, and if I were to just go and fight them all, I would most certainly die. So I'm trying to find positions where I can engage one at a time. I rushed the OR while the Leon could still shoot at me because I was pretty confident that he was going to die, and I wanted to keep Sir Derp in the Atlanta alive. Unfortunately, I was a little bit too slow, and they traded, which is not necessarily good. So as the Leon goes behind the island, I'm going to try to set up to only engage the Nagato. I took some pot shots at him as he went behind the island. I aimed towards the middle of his hull since I did not think I could get any citadels at this range, and 8k was pretty solid. Now, as the Nagato comes around this corner, he will either have to broadside me or Sherman in the Fiji by sea, and this island in front of me should block shots from the Leon. This sort of positioning is applicable to any battleship, but again, the speed and the maneuverability of the hood make it easier for her to find these sorts of positions. Again, a pretty solid 10k from shooting the middle of the hull. I still don't think I can get a citadel at this range, and shooting middle of the hull also mitigates some of the hood's inaccuracies, as the shells are less likely to go in the water. Finally, as the Nagato gets really close, I do try a waterline shot, but I get 3 pens and 3 shatters. All the meantime, by the way, I've been adjusting the speed to try to keep the Leon behind the island until the Nagato is dead, and I think we timed it just right because we're going to finish him just as the Leon starts to really peek around. Now we just need to secure the kill on the Leon for the win, and what better way to do that than with a ram? I think a lot of people sometimes forget about this. If there's only one enemy ship left on the other team, ramming him is almost always the surest way to kill him if you are close enough. This ram is a little bit sloppy because I think I almost miss, but if I had fallen in line behind the Leon, it's probably still much more dangerous for him than for me. So that was a top tier game. It is, of course, time to look at a bottom tier game as well. Sadly, top tier games are not quite as common as they were when that first game was played. Sadly, as much as I hate to admit it, the Hood does not really up tier that well. The Duke of York and Nelson probably up tier better because they have good HE. That being said, I'm basically doing the same thing here. I'm going to push maybe the middle of the flank here and turn around when it gets dangerous. On the way in, we'll of course look for some juicy targets to shoot at, like this Ibuki. Bottom and top tier cruisers are probably the best thing to shoot at because you can citadel them, unlike battleships. This is a pretty common trick coming up. Even though there were a lot of people aiming at me on priority target, I'm actually going to stay angled and rush this island so I can get behind it before turning around. I did eat a little bit of damage there, but getting those hits on that Ibuki was more than worth it in my opinion. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the crappier high tier maps don't really have the right terrain to let you make these more aggressive sort of moves. Clearing the other side of this island, there's a broadside Scharnhorst, so we aim at the middle of the hull again, and there's an easy 10k. Now, if like the Scharnhorst and the Nagato were to push the sea cap, this would be a really nice place to hang out and farm them a bit, but unfortunately, the only thing that's actually coming this way is that poor Ibuki. So we're gonna fire at him and then start going around. If you look at the mini-map, our team is kind of bunched up here, while the enemy team is lemming training to the south. Before moving on, I just want to shoot at the Nagato once here. Same tier battleship, angled, you can still do pretty decent damage due to superstructure and overmatching. 5k, I would say that is pretty solid. A bit later, we've pushed through the cap, and what do we see but a broadside Iowa? So once again, firing at the center of the hull, we get a pretty solid 10k, just like the Scharnhorst. Unfortunately, this is a situation where probably the Nagato or the Colorado could have actually gotten a sit. So, yay, short fuse. This bit is a little bit sloppy again. I'm hesitating whether to turn in or turn away from the Iowa, partly on account of trying to shoot that DD that someone else kills at the last second, of course. You can see how the Hood's armor holds up against this tier 9 battleship, though. He's getting pretty consistent chunk damage, but since the Citadel is underwater, he's basically not going to get any really massive damage, especially as long as I'm angled. Ultimately, I do decide to turn out, and I do wait for him to fire before starting my turn. You also saw that I took a couple shots at the Iowa while he was angled, and it was mostly ineffective, and the hood really doesn't have good enough HE for me to justify firing it, in my opinion, which is kind of why she doesn't up tier that well. Iowa does clip me at the end of the turn, but it was only quote-unquote for 10k, whereas that could have been a Citadel on a Nagato or Colorado. And that's just one of the strengths of the hood. This, combined with her great speed, means that she's ultimately a very forgiving ship. You trade some skill ceiling for a bit of a higher skill floor, and you can say, oh, this is a stupid ship for stupid people, but I think that makes it fun. You can do stupid things and you can get away with it. This part is sped up because it's just driving again. I tried to flank the battleships in the center, which is what I think you should do in the hood, because you need broadsides to get any damage, but all those battleships decided to angle towards me and get blapped by my team, so all I got was the kill secure on that New Orleans, but because of this, we've secured our position and are capping B, and that's pretty much the game. One more clip from the end here against the Buffalo, but that's pretty much it for the hood. It's a medium strength ship with very good ergonomics, as opposed to something like the Nelson, which is a very strong ship, but with what I think are very poor ergonomics. And if you like that kind of ship, which I do, I think you would like the hood. Finally, the hood is getting an accuracy buff in 8.0 along with a standard fuse timer. This should not change the way the ship plays fundamentally, but it may change how and what you shoot at. That remains to be seen. That being said, this is the end of the video, so have a nice day.